morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Victor News Network. As you can most likely hear, I made some adjustments to my current setup. This will be the setup as it will stand for the foreseen future, up until I'll probably get much better hardware. I have no idea when that will be happening, but will also depend on you at some point. And compared to the previous episode, I found out that the sweet spot is actually to cover the 10 news per video. This will also keep it marginally shorter, both not only for filming, but also for you when you'll be listening or watching, and also for editing sake. And now we're going back to our so-called sponsor, Matchbook Customs. Well, they don't pay me to say this. If by any chance you are into Harleys and you live in the Cambridgeshire area, however, they support also the rest of the UK. They're great people, and I'm supporting them to build a community around Harleys. Speaking of the community, the start of the season event at their workshop will be happening in Stamford in Cambridgeshire on the 23rd of March. I will most likely be there. I'll try to do my best, although it's the event will be in over a month, so I can't exactly tell you right now. You'll find the event page on the screen and the link to the Facebook event in the low bar. Suggestions regarding videos and other things that may come in your mind are accepted either via the comments on this video or via email at thehonestjew1@gmail.com, as you can see on the screen right now, or on Twitter/X. The handle is at thehonestjew1, same as the email address. Speaking of Twitter, currently, right now, as of the 7th of February, the hottest topic discussed is the Tucker Carlson and the Master Strategist interview. That one I'll definitely do my best to cover in a separate video and try to go depending on how long it is in a separate video. And the fact that this interview happens and all the ideas that float around it, especially from the crowd of the dissident right, that also gave me an idea on making another video about my personal opinion of what the position of the USA is in the world. As usual, you'll find the links and the timestamps in the description. Starting first from the far west, Fox News. House clears way to advance impeachment articles on DHS Secretary Mayorkas. Biden border chief has been heavily criticized over his handling of the southern border amid record numbers of illegal immigrants entering the U.S. House lawmakers on Tuesday carried the way to advance an impeachment resolution against Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The 216 to 209 floor vote came as the Republican-controlled House adopted the rule to manage the debate on the measure. The House then began debating two impeachment articles against the Secretary. Secretary Mayorkas took an oath to protect our nation from all enemies, both foreign and domestic, said Representative McCall, a Republican from Texas. By refusing to enforce our nation's laws, he has violated that oath, and every Texan knows it. An architect of destruction at our southern border, the Secretary has caused a serious injury to society, as the Founding Fathers discussed. I'm honored the Speaker has given me this opportunity to use my experience as a federal prosecutor to stand up for our Constitution and the safety of the American people. The resolution affirms that Mayorkas has willfully and systematically refused to comply with federal immigration laws by having repeatedly violated laws enacted by Congress regarding immigration and border security during his tenure. I don't believe there's ever been a cabinet secretary who so blatantly, openly, willfully, and without remorse did the exact opposite of what federal law asked him to do, House Speaker Mike Johnson told reporters on Tuesday. If the vote goes through, Mayorkas could be the first Biden cabinet official impeached in nearly 150 years. The impeachment articles state Mayorkas has refused to comply with federal immigration laws amid a record surge of migrants at the southern border, and that he has breached the public trust in his claims to Congress that the US-Mexico border is secure. Mayorkas has called the impeachment effort politically motivated and baseless. Last week, the House approved two impeachment articles along party lines. Republicans pointed to the high number of border crossings and mass release of migrants into the United States interior. Democrats have said the attempted impeachment is based purely on political motivations and policy disputes. What does the sham Republican impeachment effort have to do with addressing the challenges at our border? Absolutely nothing. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, a Democrat from New York, posted Tuesday on X. Fox News Digital has reached the DHS, and according to Fox News, they still haven't gotten a reply. Welcome to campaign season. What can I say? This topic of immigration, when it comes to the US, the reason why it is why it's such a hot topic and is so publicized. Yes, the issue is indeed real. However, there aren't a lot of things that are being said about the vested interest behind this entire situation with immigration. And just like always, just like with any other issue, you just got simply to follow the money. Immigration as a topic in political discourse is very lucrative for both the Democrats and the Republicans. So the both sides of the American political spectrum, we don't care about the rest. Some people unironically believe libertarians are also a third party. Just to put it into perspective, at least $1 billion per election season are being donated from all sides on this single issue alone. When it comes to mostly the executive effort, because pretty much since the 1990s, but especially with a bunch of laws that were passed back when Bill Clinton was still president. This immigration issue has remained mostly in executives' hands, and more so, this situation with immigration was passed into the DHS's hands. So the Republicans are partially right on this topic to go against Mayorkas for this. But in the grand scheme of things, this problem with immigration at the southern border, as you can most likely know, it hasn't been something that appeared in the last few years or in the last decade. It's been an issue since about 1988. So Reagan was was either on his way out or already Bush Senior took the position. Although I'm pretty sure that Bush Senior took the position already when the immigration issue really began. And back then, signs were observed. The Republicans had majority in both the House and the presidency multiple times since 1988. And make no mistake, they knew that that the problem will come to this level as it is right now. Justice Roberts told them pretty much 25 years ago when the last big immigration stood before the Supreme Court of the United States, and the court explicitly directed the legislature to write better bills that fit the constitutional frame. The Democrats refused to do so. Just like the similar situation to how the Democrats refused to codify Roe v. Wade into law, even though Ruth Bader Ginsburg, years before she passed away, has told them that there will be a point when Roe v. Wade will be overturned in the Supreme Court. And as we can see right now in 2024, that has happened. So, as I mentioned earlier, most of the power on dealing with immigration is in the hands of the executive, and by that, referring to the aforementioned laws passed in 1996, back when Bill Clinton was still president. I'm talking here specifically about two acts. One is Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, and the second one is Immigration Illegal Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act. So there are actually three, my mistake. The Immigration Responsibility Act of 1996. Pretty much what these did to make it short uh, is that it did change quite a lot of things when it came to procedure with when dealing with illegal immigrants. Say, for example, if you were caught if you're caught crossing the border, but somehow you lived in the U.S. for under a year, you'll be deported as soon as possible by the immigration authorities, and then you receive a refusal to enter the USA for a year. If they discovered that you were living for over a year in the US, you will not only get deported, but you will also get an interdiction to enter the US 3 years from that moment on. As we have seen right now, there isn't exactly a solution to this. However, on the bright side, the Republicans started playing much more with the rule book of the Democrats when it came to the immigration issue. I agree that when it comes to the southern border with Texas, uh, that's an issue in itself, and the vast majority of the crossings are there. And it isn't exactly a conspiracy that not all, but a great majority of the illegal immigrants are being sent through Texas specifically. Well, because there are power plays that have been happening on this topic for quite a while. It's exactly no secret that Texas and the Republican running Texas are not exactly very popular uh, to either to either the bureaucrat class in Washington, but also the executive, as it is being run right now by Democrats. But as I said earlier, they started playing with the Democrat rule book, and instead of keeping their illegal immigrants within Texas, what they did was to share this this gift with other states, particularly Democrat ones. Here I'll make a reminder. I think 2 years and a bit ago, the the illegal immigrants were sent by Texas. Either back then I think it was using buses. They were sent to Martha's Vineyard, and that caused quite a shitstorm in itself. Not only with the local population there, but also with the Democrats, because a lot of the Democrats, since a great part of them come from the Yankeedom. Martha's Vineyard is essentially, how would I put it, the official vacation spot for most of the Democrats, but also other high-level politicians. I kind of get their point of view. That's a pretty nice place. But when you concentrate so much political prowess, so to say, in a single place. So when Texas sent the illegal immigrants there, just like they did most recently uh, to Chicago, of course the Democrats were very upset because the Democrats played quite a lot this card of sympathy towards the illegal immigrants, as long as the illegal immigrants were not in their place. Not can't exactly say their place, but in the area where they gather their votes from and where their voting base is, so their constituency. That's the word that I wanted to get to. Overall, as I said, the this is an electoral year in the US, and tensions are running pretty high considering the entire shit show that has been going on. Not to mention, all the other mini shit shows that turn into one big pile of a shit show when it comes to the election, because the stakes are really high. A lot of people are very upset for a lot of reasons, whether they may be real or not. But again, perception is reality. Uh, Even though on paper, economically, the American populace isn't doing as bad as the rest of the Western world, uh, people still have got a lot of issues that date back since the pandemic. And this is playing here with the memory time span of an average voter, which is about 3 years, four at most, unless it's something really egregious, which will never be forgotten, similar to what happened between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. So, in order to close this one, do not be surprised by this, particularly do not overfeed yourself with news articles when it comes to the election. Always look at the substrate because there are definitely many more things that are there compared to what they're mentioned in the same news articles running. Going back to another shit show, which has hurt quite a lot of people, sadly. NBC. FAA increases oversight on Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets after Alaska Airlines near disaster. A door panel on an Alaska Airlines jet carrying 177 people blew out midair on its way from Oregon to California on the 5th of January. The Federal Aviation Administration announced Monday that it will start taking a closer look at Boeing 737 MAX 9 jets. The FAA is increasing its oversight on Boeing's production lines and suppliers and limiting certain approvals until they are satisfied that the quality control issues uncovered during this process are resolved, the administration said. This comes in the wake of a near disaster that saw a door panel on an Alaska Airlines jet carrying 177 people blew out midair on the 5th of January. The airline CEO, Ben Minicucci, said new in-house inspections of the carrier's Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes following the incident revealed that many of the aircraft were found to have loose bolts. The FAA temporarily grounded about 171 out of 218 Boeing 737 MAX 9 airplanes used by U.S. airlines after the incident and announced an investigation into Boeing. Since then, Alaska Airlines and United Airlines both confirmed plans to return their fleet of Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes into service. The FAA has already inspected the existing Alaska and United Airlines jets and returned 93.75%, or 135 out of 144 of them, to service, according to FAA Deputy Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety, Jody Baker. However, the administration is only 3 weeks into its increased oversight of the aircraft, and it's too early to draw conclusions, Baker said at a news briefing. The FAA will address concerns as they come up, she added. This is not new work, understanding how aircraft are manufactured, and we have the expertise to do that, Baker said. The FAA is focusing on hiring more employees to help with the oversight at the Boeing Grandin factory and streamline the data collection process. Baker said the administration wants to step up more interaction and more direct observation of work that's being accomplished at Boeing. The administration expects the oversight process to take 6 weeks. So, I've added an extra article from the South China Morning Post. The investigation actually found out specifically to the Alaska Airlines plane that the bolts they were not just loose. The bolts did not even exist. And relating to that specific plug door that Boeing installed, normally, as technical reports say, that door should have 4 bolts, and none of them were there. This is sadly Not the first time in recent history when Boeing has royally messed up. Uh, Here I'll bring reference to the scandal with the Boeing 737 MAX 8, so the one that preceded this one, and how the software in that Boeing airplane failed, leading to hundreds of deaths in two separate airplane crashes because the software, which is called the MCAS, it's meant to control the angle of attack of a plane. Um, Instead of doing what it's meant to, it experienced a sudden error, and during autopilot, it's been discovered that it overrided the normal elevation controls, which led to the plane nosediving to not only its death, but the death of absolutely everybody on board. Weeks later, after that scandal, it's been discovered that that the people responsible for programming that piece of software for the 737 MAX 8 were, if I reckon, an Indian company whose employees were paid about $10 an hour. And as probably some of you who I know that work in IT can surely tell, Indians, even though they represent a numerous population when it comes to representation in the IT industry on the globe, they don't exactly do the greatest work, and that's putting it lightly. If I am to go to the full extent uh, of throwing out absolutely everything that I heard about the Indians and their work in IT, uh, we would be spending just 5 or so minutes on this topic. We will definitely go on for hours and hours and hours on end, using a lot of examples from a lot of domains that have to do with the IT. It doesn't have to be just simply programming software for the airline industry, but absolutely everything else. And this is not me saying that the Indians are doing a bad job, because out of India, also quite a lot of good programmers uh, came out in the world, and you can even see right now that you have people like Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO of Google, and Indians are also omnipresent in the IT field. A lot of big companies in the IT industry came out of India. Take Infosys, for example. And in order to keep the meme alive, some of the best programming courses that have appeared, and without asking an arm and a leg for them, you'll definitely find them on YouTube from Indian publishers and general Indian uploaders. But going back to this discussion about what the hell has been happening in Boeing, first of all, to present a larger view on things like these. How does it happen, for example, that when it comes to Airbus, so that is Boeing's main competitor, and by main competitor, we're not taking into consideration other manufacturers. I know that they exist, but we're not taking seriously uh, things like that Chinese airplane that has been bought by a lot of Chinese companies, which it looks awfully similar to a copied Airbus. We're definitely not going to take into consideration other, other commercial airline planes, for example, the ones built by Russia. In this current world, you have two choices. You either go the Airbus route or you go the Boeing route. And when you're faced with a duopoly like this in the larger world, and Boeing and ends up doing these things, well, what can I say? Something is definitely rotten at the Boeing headquarters. And what I mean by that is that reports came out in the past few months, also related to this incident, but before this incident as well. Uh, the bonus scheme of managers at Boeing, but particularly Boeing Manufacturing, uh, uh, starting the previous fiscal year, a new bonus scheme has been voted by the board for them, which included much larger bonuses if the managers succeeded in essentially employing the underrepresented minorities, and by that I mean they employ more black people, they employ more Latinos, employ more sexual minorities. So anything that has to do and more like anything that doesn't have to do with actual competence. And even though you may be right, well, this thing has been the case for a year and a bit. How is it possible that that evidence of this, such as this disaster, have appeared right now? Because building planes is not something that you do in a few days or in a few weeks. It's something that takes a few months. There's a reason why the waiting lists to receive airplanes take even years. Well, yeah, but even though this bonus practice has been implemented fairly recently, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been the case before this bonus scheme to the managers. And we're going back here to ESG scoring. ESG scoring, which is, from my own perspective, a complete perversion of absolutely anything that has to do with business fundamentals. It has a lot of perverse incentives, and the main benefit of it is just for the naive shareholders or the very few institutions that actually give a toss about ESG scoring. One example that I can give is the Norwegian sovereign oil fund that cares quite a lot about ESG scoring. Well, it's not exactly difficult to put one and one together and reach at least a probable cause to the things that are happening right now and things that may probably happen in the future, because this is a symptom of a much larger malignancy within Boeing operations. And make no mistake, Boeing is not the only institution that has been messing up in this department. As this article mentions, the FAA is also up to hiring more employees, and and not just the FAA hiring more employees, but the FAA also in the last few weeks, when other articles came up in the press mentioning the fact that they want to focus more on hiring underrepresented minorities as well, and especially in much more critical instances, for example, air traffic control. I wouldn't want to go down the conspiracies route, but let me just say that if I am to fly in the US in the foreseeable future, I would definitely be slightly worried uh, when when in important positions like these, you put people who end up there not because they're competent in it. They're cool. You put the people that end up there are put into that position for completely other different reasons than competency, which is the only thing that has mattered in the past, still matters now to some extent, but should definitely matter in the future. Because if it doesn't matter, we're going to see other disasters in the future, which are tied to this. Business Insider. Donald Trump scares Chinese investors as much as China's faltering economy, Goldman Sachs says. Chinese investors are worrying about November's presidential election, according to Goldman Sachs. Donald Trump has signaled he'd impose tariffs on more than 60% of Chinese imports if elected. Local investors are also fretting about China's faltering economy, Goldman Sachs has found. Chinese investors aren't just worried about China's faltering economy, they're also fretting about Donald Trump's potential return to the White House, according to Goldman Sachs. The bank surveyed local fund managers and found one of their top concerns is the Republican frontrunner, who signaled he'd ramp up Washington's trade war with Beijing by imposing tariffs on Chinese goods. The most frequently asked questions among local investors include implications for China should Donald Trump become the next US president, what would trigger more aggressive policy easing in China, and offshore investors' view about Chinese stocks after persistent weak equity market performance, a team of analysts led by Maggie Wei said in a research note published on Friday. Goldman Sachs clients in offshore markets like Hong Kong tend to be more focused on economic fundamentals, for example, whether property markets may have bottomed or whether deflation will continue, and what policymakers can do to fight deflation, they added. Trump has positioned himself as a China hawk ahead of November's election. On Sunday, he told Fox News Sunday Morning Futures that he'd impose tariffs on more than 60% on Chinese goods. No, I would say maybe it's going to be more than 60%, Trump said in response to a question from presenter Maria Bartiromo about a Washington Post report that said he'd ramp up the trade war between the two countries. You have to do it, he added. You know, obviously I'm not looking to hurt China. I want to get along with China. I think it's great. But they've already taken advantage of our country. Trump's tariff threat comes with China's exports plunging. Policymakers have also failed to stave off deflation and are struggling to contain a property market crisis that brought down indebted real estate developers such as Evergrande and Country Garden in recent years. Beijing has also turned to rare intervention measures in a bid to end the meltdown in stock prices that wiped out over $6 trillion in valuation since 2021. The flagship CSI 300 index is down 22% over the past 12 months, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng gauge has slumped 27% over the same period. Well, if Trump does happen to win the elections, China is definitely in big trouble, as tariffs will definitely expand than the ones they are now. And this is not something that has to do solely with Trump. If you are to go back several years ago, back when Trump was still president, there was already a bipartisan consensus in the legislature related to tariffs on Chinese imports. So this is definitely not something that Trump devised by himself, and this is definitely not something new. He just provided the right push towards implementing them. And when it comes to the economic situation in China, they are in a pretty bad situation. As I mentioned in the previous episode, the main reason why Xi Jinping came to San Francisco to meet with Biden and other people is because the situation in China at an economical level is not looking too sexy. And there's also another article which I put, and I will discuss much later on in this podcast about the situation in China. So overall, things are definitely not looking too well. Don't ask me who I think is going to win in the US because I have absolutely no idea. Uh, currently, both sides are bad. Even if the Democrats go with Gavin Newsom, I'm not exactly sure that will be a great idea. I'm not exactly sure even if Trump would be the one that will be elected, or at least in the current context as of the 7th of February 2024, if he'll actually be the Republican runner for the presidency. It's way too early to tell. But this is going to be a difficult electoral season on both sides, and the fight will be tough. Still, considering at least on the Republican side of the aisle, the situation with intervening against Chinese imports or against Chinese things in general, or things that end up in China, definitely the Republicans find it much more appealing when it comes to policy making in order to hurt them. And to carry this point across, even the Democrats did it themselves. Take, for example, the chip ban. And even though the chip ban isn't exactly the be-all and end-all solution when it comes to pushing away China from semiconductor development, because it definitely isn't. The semiconductor industry is something much more complicated than there are better people that can explain to you the way things are done behind the scenes. But just like back during the days of the Soviet Union, the US themselves, especially during the days of Reagan, when Reagan became increasingly hostile when it comes to the things that ended up being exported into the USSR. One important one was technology, and technology is also important here when it comes to China. Even though China does operate a lot of economic and industrial espionage, some of it civilian, but most of it military, and they do have a lot of resources dedicated to this. It still won't change the fact that the aim of things like tariffs and potentially sanctions uh, in a medium or distant future, it is to put economic pressure and to make said technology development much more expensive than it will be in the West. Take, for example, when it comes to semiconductors, EUV technology, which uh, which is the technology employed by companies like TSMC to make the new chips that have been used in the past few years, and the ones that will come up in the next few years in all sorts of either consumer or professional products. In this discussion, uh, while while China can and they do subsidize either chip development mm, or when it comes to semiconductors manufacturing in general, when it comes to blocking off access to technologies like these, you automatically make said development disproportionately more expensive than it should be, because you're running in a framework of limitations that normally shouldn't have been there. But at the same time, already semiconductor development in itself is an expensive ordeal. The Just to put it into perspective, when TSMC jumped from 12 nanometers, if I'm correct, to 7 nanometers, which I think 7 nanometers, at least a second generation 7 nanometer started using uh, uh, extreme ultraviolet technology in order to print the said chips on the wafers. Uh, just just the investment into starting 7 nanometer chips was something that cost TSMC $200 billion, them $200 billion themselves. And even though China is a big company, not a big company, my mistake. Even though China is a big country and they do have a lot of sources of income and a lot of money that they can maneuver around, just like they always did in order to prop up their economy and to make their exports pretty much ubiquitous in the current world when it's difficult to find something that's not made in China, and even more difficult to find something that is cheap and not made in China. Overall, it's going to be an interesting situation, which we can definitely see it happening right now. But more so, it's going to be definitely more interesting once this year will end, because about half of the planet has elections in one way or another. Quite a lot of countries, take for example, in Europe, they have a lot of elections happening this year. It's definitely going to be volatile, and it's definitely going to be uh, full of battles. No, not just in the media, but also in the political statements. Some of them, which will definitely be uh, for sure fake news coming from other sides of the world. Fortune. After Jamie Dimon warns of market rebellion against $34 trillion national debt, Fed's Jerome Powell says it's past time for an adult conversation about unsustainable fiscal policy. With the United States national debt closing in on $34.2 trillion, some of the biggest figures in the world of finance have been speaking out. But few expected Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to address this issue, at least until this weekend, when Powell spoke out about the debt on CBS's 60 Minutes Sunday. In the long run, the US is on an unsustainable fiscal path, Powell warned. Even as the US economy avoided the widely forecast recession in 2023, record government spending and lower tax receipts led to the national debt to surge to an all-time high. And that trend has continued into this year. The US government debt to GDP ratio, a measure of total public debt to economic growth, has surged to just over 100% in 2019 to over 120%. That's down to the COVID era peak of 133%, but as Powell put it, the government's debt is still growing faster than the economy. This means it's now past time to get back to another conversation among elected officials about getting the federal government back on a sustainable fiscal path, Powell argued Sunday. Borrowing from future generations. It's rare to see a Fed official discuss politics. The US Central Bank is supposed to be a nonpartisan, independent institution after all. Powell reiterated as much in his 60 Minutes interview over the weekend, saying, "We most likely try very hard not to comment on fiscal policy and instruct Congress on how to do their job when actually they have oversight over us." But almost immediately after that statement, Powell criticized lawmakers for effectively borrowing from future generations with their unsustainable policies. "It's time for us to get back to putting a priority on fiscal sustainability," he added. Fed Chair Powell joins a number of critics on fiscal policy and the surging national debt, including JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon. Dimon warned last month that the US economy is headed for a cliff if something isn't done to address the federal government's excessive debt burden. "We see the cliff. It's about 10 years out. We're going 60 miles an hour towards it," he said at a bipartisan policy center panel. Dimon argued that US lawmakers will need to alter the current path of spending and control the national debt, or there could be rebellion among foreign investors of US government bonds. Other Wall Street heavyweights have been criticizing rising federal deficits for years. Mark Spitznagel, founder and chief investment officer of private hedge fund Universa Investments, told Fortune last year that we are living through the greatest credit bubble in human history. "And that's not my opinion, that's just numbers," he said. "There is no question about the fact that we are living in an age of leverage, an age of credit, and it will have its consequences." Ray Dalio, founder of hedge fund giant Bridgewater Associates, has also been warning of brewing issues. In December, he argued that the US government is reaching an inflection point with its debt problem. Eventually, the government will have to borrow just to make its annual debt servicing payments, and that's a recipe for a debt crisis, Dalio warned. Some good news. The good news, as Powell described Sunday, the US still has a dynamic, innovative, flexible, adaptable economy, more so than other countries. Powell argued that this is the big reason why the US economy has outperformed its peers over the past few years, but there are a few others, as Fortune detailed last week. America's dynamic economy means that situation isn't too far gone to rectify just yet. But as Powell said, sooner is better than later. Despite the criticism, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has brushed off concerns about the rising national debt. The key metric Yellen looks at is net interest payments as a share of GDP, and that is still at a very reasonable level, she argued in a CNBC interview last September. Well, the truth of the matter is, Powell is definitely right on this topic. Although, and the Powell definitely does know this main aspect about the U.S. economy, the fact that the U.S. in itself can grow out of the debt it's building up. Although it's true that that has definitely spiraled out of control, and one of the reasons why that spiraled out of control is not just what happened during the pandemic when the Federal Reserve started the money printer and pushed it into overdrive. But here, let's just say things as they are. Former President Trump is also to blame for this. What do you think happens when you suddenly give stimulus checks to almost the entire population of the U.S.? Sure, per individual, it does mean something to give them. I don't exactly remember how much it was, $1,800 or $2,000. But in the grand scheme of things, that does put quite a lot of inflationary pressure. And also Powell is right. One of the reasons why in the U.S. there aren't bigger problems when it comes to national debt is because the U.S. economy uh, is much more dynamic than anybody else. You wouldn't see, for example, the UK pulling such a stunt and uh, and using the numbers. It's even more impressive than uh, than I can actually comment to you from uh, from the COVID era peak of 133% debt to GDP. Uh, it's still not as bad today as it normally should be. But overall, this situation with the national debt is much more sticky than it is. If you are to remember, I think in 2018 or 2019, uh, Trump passed either passed a law or passed a measure. No, I'm not exactly sure what it was back then. But the federal government back then uh, did pay back about $300 billion in order to extinguish some of the national debt. I don't exactly remember what was the motivation of this or what or whose idea was it back then. But what I definitely remember was the absolute scare that was in the markets back then when the government paid those $300 billion. And this is something that you don't have to trust me. You can simply go look on the debt calculator, go back to when the government did make that $300 billion payment, and then just look at the news articles that came out in the financial press back then. It caused quite a lot of shock, and uh, and he is definitely right. This is also a symptom, but quite a serious symptom of this world that we live in, especially in the West, when fundamentals no longer matter. Powell isn't a stupid person. He is actually really smart if you possess the autism level required to listen to the hearings that he's been attending and also other discussions carried out with other people that work in either national or multinational banking. But the problem of Jerome Powell is and rightfully so. He is definitely too smart for the crowd that he is supposed to please, and by that I mean the the state, the state, the committees that which he is obligatory a part of, and he is obligated to give reports from time to time about what the situation is. So overall, uh, he is right when he says that we are borrowing from future generations. This is the problem everywhere else in the world. When it comes to spiraling and inflationary measures that are taken by by national banks, whether they are state-owned or privately owned. So overall, he's definitely not wrong, and the conversation needs to be carried out. However, what I will say is that I don't think he found the right time to bring this conversation up. As mentioned in the earlier article, it's currently an election year in the US, and not only just a controversial one, but a very difficult one for both sides of the aisle in the political spectrum of the United States. And so again, we're not talking here about the libertarians because even the libertarians don't exactly know what they truly want, judging by the people they nominated to be their runners in elections. But still, this will definitely have to be addressed at some point. Uh, even though the U.S. in itself and especially the US dollar is still be recognized for a long time from now on as the world reserve currency, and you can even go to Mongolia and still have US dollars accepted compared to other different types of currencies. And here even I'm talking about euros or British pounds. Everybody knows the value of the US dollar. However, it's definitely better to prevent a problem than to treat it. And here's where I think that Janet Yellen is looking through a narrow lens. She is looking currently at net interest payments as a share of GDP as a reference point. Well, yeah, it's true, but those interest payments as a proportion are still low because the US isn't paying quite a lot right now on their treasury bonds compared to what will happen in a few years when the US will have to pay the increased interest rates on the treasury bonds that were issued during the pandemic, and that's when things will get pretty spicy. And this guy from the CEO from JP Morgan Chase, he is definitely right when he's talking about the nation having gotten used with using too much credit. Definitely, because also the consumers are at fault for this, and the entire system is at fault for this. The entire system that was built upon this conditioning of Americans to use as much credit. Sure, crediting to individuals used to mean something back in early 70s and in the 80s. Uh, but back then you had mostly executives or people in high positions or people who made quite a lot of money who access to set credit facilities as a measure of improving their cash velocity. That is true. But the situation back then and the situation right now, and most importantly, the situation which I say that is right now, but it's actually been the same with varying degrees of severity since about the late 1990s. It, is that Americans use credit too easily, and it's not that they use credit too easily, but also interest rates on set credit facilities are also pretty high. If Americans want to solve this issue with inflation, stop using credit. This, uh, where do you think the set interest that you have to pay comes from? You, by using credit, you're automatically adding more money per individual into the economy because you have to make that extra interest payment on top of what you've already used in order to purchase whatever thing you want with said credit. It doesn't matter if you're using a credit card, although credit cards are the most egregious example when it comes to sheer consumerist spending. But that also goes to make getting new cars, and of course the who the hell in this world exactly still buys cars with cash. Uh, Most of the people uh, employ financing in order to get their cars, and to get further to this point, house loans as well. So house loans are by far the biggest problem because houses themselves are expensive, unfortunately. So yeah, uh, if the normal U.S. citizen, or at least the normal U.S. resident, operates at this mindset and sees absolutely nothing wrong with their consumers' practices, it didn't take too far long for banking and crediting institutions to get the gist of this and to start employing the same measures themselves. Why do you think, for example, in this world we can have companies like Uber who've been already operating for over a decade and still do not turn a profit? Well, they don't turn a profit because for said investors, it's much more lucrative to have their net worth inflated by the sheer performance of the stock price of Uber. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everybody does with their money what they do. If they think that's something lucrative for them, by all means. If something happens, it's your money. It's not my money, and it is what it is in the end. From the government's perspective, the situation is definitely vastly different than it is to what happens at the level of the private banking sector. And here, let's be frank about this. As it is the issue here in the UK, and as it is the issue in other countries in the Western world, there are programs which are essentially humongous grifting operations, and where a lot of people who have been either friendly or they really assisted said politician that ended up in power back then, they got parked instead positions within the public sector. One very good example is public health care. And even though, yes, some people would say that, but the US doesn't have public health care. Well, they don't have public health care per se as it is the NHS in the UK. Overall, if you are to look at the pie chart of how much the US state spends on things like social programs, food stamps, uh, WIC, Section 8, the Obamacare, or what used to be Obamacare. I know it's no longer a thing, but programs like these, and it's not even the government offering a direct solution like it happens in other civilized countries in the West. What the government does is essentially pay the insurance companies a sum of money to cover people who would normally not be covered by insurance for an array of reasons. And so the insurance companies, when it comes to dealing with the government, I don't exactly blame them when they go down the route of simply asking as much as they consider the government has to pay for insuring people like these. Because why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they? The mentality at the private sector when you're working with the government is that if you make your case well enough, you can get as much money as you can virtually want uh, from the state. That's also why in this world when people live belong outside of the means, or more like beyond their means, when governments live beyond their means, the correction that will be coming in a not so distant future will look pretty ugly. So now, moving on to a bit of good news. Reuters. El Salvador's Bukele re-elected as president in a landslide win. President Nayib Bukele on Sunday secured a thumping victory in El Salvador's elections after voters cast aside concerns about erosion of democracy to reward him a fierce gang crackdown that transformed security in the Central American country. Provisional results on Monday morning show Bukele winning 83% support, with over 70% of the ballots counted. Bukele declared himself the winner before official results were announced, claiming to have attained more than 85% of the vote. Thousands of Bukele's supporters, clad in cyan blue and waving flags, thronged San Salvador's central square to celebrate his re-election, which the 42-year-old leader termed a referendum on his government. His New Ideas party is expected to win almost all of the 60 seats in the legislative body, tightening its grip on the country and bestowing even more sway on Bukele, the most powerful leader in El Salvador's modern history. Altogether, the opposition was pulverized. Bukele, standing with his wife on the balcony of the National Palace, told his supporters, El Salvador went from being the most unsafe country to the safest. Now, in these next 5 years, wait to see what we are going to do, Bukele added. New Ideas' electoral success means Bukele will wield unprecedented power and be able to overhaul El Salvador's constitution, which his opponents fear will result in scrapping of term limits. Widely popular, Bukele has campaigned on the success of his security strategy, under which authorities suspended civil liberties to arrest more than 75,000 Salvadorans without charges. The detentions led to a sharp decline in nationwide murder rates and fundamentally altered the country of 6.3 million people that was once among the world's most dangerous. But some analysts have said that a mass incarceration of 1% of the population is not sustainable long term. Bukele earlier told a press conference that his party needed all the support it could muster to maintain its anti-gang fight and continue reshaping El Salvador. So, if we already overcome our cancer, which metastases that were the gangs, now we only have to recover and be the person we always wanted to be, said Bukele. Few doubted the outcome of the elections. Polls show most voters wanted to reward Bukele for decimating the crime groups that made life intolerable in El Salvador and fueled waves of migration to the United States. Guadalupe Guillen, a 55-year shopkeeper, showed up at the victory party dressed in tunic and Arab scarf, a nod to Bukele's Palestinian family heritage. We are celebrating, thanking him, thanking God for getting us out of this gang problem. We don't want to go back to that horrible past, said Guillen, who added she no longer pays $300 in extortion to the gangs every fortnight. Democracy is not at risk because all the people have voted for him, said Guillen, echoing the government's stance regarding concerns by Western countries of authoritarian drift under Bukele. Candidates for FMLN and Arena, two parties that rotated power between them in 2019, were said to receive single-digit support as voters once again rejected traditional parties whose rule was marked by violence and corruption for decades. A firebrand politician who often spars with foreign leaders and critics on social media, Bukele came to power in 2019, trouncing traditional parties with a vow to eliminate gang violence and rejuvenate a stagnant economy. He used his New Ideas Party, supermajority, in the Legislative Assembly to pack the courts with loyalists and overhaul state institutions. Sorry about that. To overhaul state institutions, solidifying control of key parts of the government. He also championed the introduction of Bitcoin as legal tender, drawing criticism from the International Monetary Fund. El Salvador's Supreme Electoral Tribunal last year permitted him to run for a second term even though the country's constitution prohibits it. Opponents fear Bukele would seek to rule for life following President Daniel Ortega from next door Nicaragua. Everybody knows it is unconstitutional to re-elect the president, but what people want is security. They don't care if it is unconstitutional, they just want to feel safe, said Josue Galdames, 39, a businessman and trader who supported Bukele because of his crusade against gangs. When asked on Sunday by reporters if he planned to reform the constitution to include the indefinite re-election, Bukele said he didn't think a constitutional reform would be necessary, but did not directly answer questions on whether he would try to run for a third term. The Chinese embassy in San Salvador, in a post on X, congratulated Bukele and his party for the historic victory in these elections. Rights groups have said El Salvador's democracy is under attack. Bukele has taken such concerns in stride, at one point changing his profile next to say, world's coolest dictator. Bukele's biggest challenge in his second term is likely to be the economy, Central America's slowest growing during his time in power. More than a quarter of Salvadorans live in poverty. Extreme poverty has doubled and private investment has tumbled under Bukele. There has not been such momentum in his highly publicized plans for Bitcoin City, a tax-free crypto haven powered by geothermal energy from a volcano. The IMF, which is negotiating a $1.3 billion bailout with El Salvador in late 2023, described the country's fiscal situation as fragile. Well, just to put it into context, when Bukele took power in 2019, the homicide rate was 38 people per 100,000. And the 2023 statistic, so the most recent one, way before he got re-elected, says 2.4 per 100,000 people. To put it into perspective, that is Luxembourg's homicide rate, and Luxembourg is a city of a few tens of thousands of people sandwiched between countries, and that's why he won a re-election. In case people forget, and especially the all sorts of apparatchiks within the Salvadoran government, but most importantly, all the activists, which are definitely funded by leftist institutions outside of Salvador. In a democracy, the majority is always right. If you don't think the majority is always right, look at just what I said above. This is a significant step in El Salvador's history, even though to some extent private investment has tumbled under Bukele, but private investment has tumbled absolutely everywhere. Bukele was still a president during the pandemic, and during the pandemic, as we have seen, the entire world went mad for a while. and faced with uh, economic concerns almost everywhere in the world, who exactly would have the money and time uh, to invest in El Salvador? Bukele, what Bukele did essentially is really smart, and not just smart in itself, but also long overdue. And Bukele represents a really uncomfortable model of operation for the rest of the countries in Latin America, Mexico in particular being quite the sticking point in this comparison. You can't expect to have foreign investors come into your country if in your country you have we have examples such as this shopkeeper mentioned in the article, which had to pay 300 US dollars every 2 weeks to a gang, uh, essentially for uh, essentially for racketeering. Yeah, you're asking for protection money. Essentially, it's the thing that is the thing that the current mafia in Russia is doing. It's the thing that that Al Capone did back during the Prohibition to businesses in Chicago. So when the situation was as bad as it was, and the people got sick of it, the politician with the solution came in. The during the pandemic has proven to be the best excuse for Bukele to start just to start cleaning up the country. And even though yes, the methods may seem brutal, even though yes, the said people in that ended up in prison, the vast majority of them being yeah, cartel members, people from cartels like MS-13. It wasn't just the issue with MS-13 dealing in drugs, but there were also a lot of sex trafficking that was done by MS-13 and that other gang whose name I forget, but I think but I think they carried the number 18 with them. And faced with the situation, you as a country, if you can't exactly go to you can't exactly go somewhere because there are high odds that you're going to be shot or murdered or mugged on the street. If you as a country can't even open a shop without having to pay protection money to a cartel, and quite a lot of money to be mentioned by El Salvador standards, how do you exactly expect foreign investment to come in your country? I don't see quite a lot of foreign investment going into countries which currently have situations similar to what El Salvador had until recently, especially with the homicide rates and with all sorts of crazy gangs going around and imposing their crazy schemes. Take, for example, a close by neighbor of El Salvador, Honduras. Honduras is still in the same shit situation that has been the past decade or so, with currently with the murder rate higher than what used to be the peak murder rate in El Salvador. The peak in El Salvador was reached in 2015, and the murder rate back then was 120 people per 100,000. By comparison, at least in the last statistic I checked, when it came to Honduras, the homicide rate was in 2021 140 per 100,000 people. You don't see, for example, a lot of foreign investment flocking into South Africa, and South Africa does have quite a myriad of other issues. But other issues can be solved in their own way, with this lack of security, this is an issue that affects absolutely everybody. the people, not only not just the people inside your country, but also the people, the people that may want to come visit your country, and the people that may want to invest in your country. You're not exactly presenting yourself as a lucrative country to work in when you essentially need armed guards to flank you whenever you're going somewhere like, for example, Johannesburg. Even though you're not going there for an important reason, and you're not exactly an important person to at least present some interest in order to have money extorted off of you. No, it's simply just that. Mm, it's just that when you get to the level when in order to be safe you need armed guards around you, something is definitely messed up. And to reiterate this point, the people have spoken. As much as other foreign interests cry about how Bukele um, is apparently a dictator. Uh, well, yeah. Here I also bring the discussion mentioned in the previous podcast when it came to the Palestinian issue. At some point, we definitely have to look at how exactly can we consider a human, and what things does a human have to do in order to no longer be considered a human. Call me radical, but I don't think somebody like a gang member of MS-13 uh, who's getting involved in multinational drug trade or sex trafficking can still be considered a human. It's not especially not especially when they congregate in such a significant group to the level where your safety on a daily basis is at risk. And yeah, the situation as it was, well, to a great extent, it got resolved. Leaving aside this thing with Bukele and with Bitcoin City and with making Bitcoin the currency of the country. Make no mistake, that's just bullshit that's been pushed to you by the naive press. The the US dollar has been used for over 20 years as the currency in El Salvador, and that's not a thing that will change anytime soon. And if we are to look at the standard of Latin American countries, and especially comparing small or medium Latin American countries and how terribly they mismanage their currencies. What I think that Bukele tried to do is simply throw a bone at the national bank in order to keep them busy, which is this thing with the Bitcoin, and then let the larger economy made up by the people and the businesses to pretty much do their own thing. Specifically because when institutions within Latin American governments start having ideas that they know better how to manage a situation uh, than than it is currently, you end up with circumstances like Argentina. Uh, Argentina, uh, Argentina. I don't think I have to remind you this, but Argentina has been in a shit situation economically for over 30 years, to a level absolutely unimaginable by the rest of the Western world. The, there are singular countries on this planet that can compare themselves with a situation that was in Argentina up until very recently. And even in Argentina, inertia have does have to go its own course up until things will get better. So what I'm pretty sure will happen right now is that Bukele will keep on doing what he's doing law and order situation, keeping things as they are, and prevent other gangs from coming up and destabilizing the country and its population. But from now on, and even though this is moronic to say, but where are we starting to have discussions about his third term, unless you're malintended. Bukele's focus will be now to present El Salvador as a viable place in order to get foreign investments, which is something that he'll definitely do. If Getting back to Bitcoin City, yeah, it is a tax-free crypto haven, but just the fact that it's tax-free, that's already significant development. Uh, this world definitely needs either more tax-free places or more special economic zones, uh, because countries already have gotten way overboard on average with legislation. We've already seen not only with modern monetary theory, but also with the way economies were managed during the pandemic, that the government has no idea what to do. So if the government doesn't have any idea what to do, well, at least leave, for starters, a few enclaves where business can be carried out in a much more sincere way, and not so oppressively as businesses have been treated for such a long while. Um, Speaking of fishy businesses, BBC: Russian oil getting into UK via refinery loophole, records claim. Millions of barrels of fuel made from Russian oil are still being imported to the UK despite sanctions imposed over the war in Ukraine, research claims. A so-called loophole means Russian crude is refined in countries such as India and the product sold to the UK. This is not illegal and does not breach UK's Russian oil ban, but critics say it undermines sanctions aimed at restricting Russia's war funds. The UK government denied there had been any imports of Russian oil since 2022, but a spokesperson said internationally recognized rules of origin define that crude, once refined in another country, is classed for the purposes of trade as originating from the refining country. The UK is among many Western countries to ban the import of all oil and oil products that originate in Russia in a bid that hit the amount of cash Moscow can generate from fossil fuels. But two separate reports shared exclusively with the BBC suggest the rules on refining enable products made from Russian crude oil to arrive on UK soil. The Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air said this refining loophole meant countries such as India and China, who have not sanctioned the Kremlin, are able to legally import Russian crude and refine it into oil products such as jet fuel and diesel. They then export these products to the likes of the UK and the EU. The issue with this loophole is that it increases the demand for Russian crude and enables higher sales in terms of volume and pushing up their price as well, which increases the funds sent to the Kremlin's war chest, said Isaac Levi, head of CREA's Europe-Russia policy and energy analysis. In a separate research paper, campaign group Global Witness estimated that throughout 2023, some 5.2 million barrels of refined petroleum products have been produced from Russian crude oil, more important to the UK. Most of the fuel imported, 4.6 million barrels, was jet fuel, which the group's researchers suggested was used in 1 in 20 UK flights. Leila Stanley, campaign lead for the Ukraine team at Global Witness, said while the UK government falls over itself to decry the war in Ukraine, it remains complicit in the sale of Russian oil by keeping this refining loophole open. Every single pound spent on Russian oil helps Putin pay for his brutal war, she added. The exclusive figures shared with the BBC from CREA estimated that during the first 12 months of the Russian oil ban from December 2022, some 569 million pounds sterling worth of oil products were imported by the UK were derived from Russian crude. Both reports claim the so-called loophole indirectly provided the Kremlin with more than 100 million pounds in tax revenues. They also said the bulk of the imports came mainly from three oil refineries in India, Jamnagar, Vadinar, and New Mangalore, along with 9 others in several countries including China. Most of the estimates made by CREA and Global Witness were based on analysis of oil shipment figures from data and analytics firm Kepler, with pricing data based on Eurostat along with some other data sources. Both CREA and Global Witness said the two research papers were based on assumptions and admitted there were challenges and limitations around analyzing such trade. Figures from the International Energy Agency show that Indian reports of Russian crude have increased since the war in Ukraine began. In response to sanctions, Russia dropped its oil prices to attract new buyers. Since the invasion, the UK imports of Indian jet fuel and diesel have also risen. Russia is the world's third largest oil producer. It extracts crude oil from the earth, which is then exported to refineries and turned into products such as petrol, diesel, jet fuel, and various plastics. The Russian economy is highly dependent on such exports. Western allies have hit Russia with numerous sanctions, including an oil price cap, which aims to prevent Moscow from getting more than $60 for a barrel of crude oil. But there are questions on whether the measures are as harsh as hoped after the International Monetary Fund recently upgraded its forecast for Russia's economic growth in 2024 from 1.1 to 2.6. Boy, they wish. The sanctions have also had an impact on the countries imposing them. The prices for both oil and gas soaring as nations, mainly those in the EU, scramble for new supplies away from Russia. In January last year, trade statistics suggested the UK had imported no fossil fuels from the country, whereas the 2021 imports of gas, oil and coal from Russia to the UK were worth a combined £4.5 billion. The UK government spokesman said since sanctions had come into effect, there had been no import of Russian oil and oil products into the UK. He said in addition to providing proof that goods are not of Russian origin, importers must now include a country of last dispatch to ensure oil from Russia is not being diverted through other countries. Brian Mullier, co-head of the International Trade and Customs Group at law firm Bird and Bird, said rules of origin ultimately meant that Russian crude oil refined in a country such as India would be classed as Indian oil. A change in origin is determined based on substantial processing, he said. Once Russian refined oil products are substantially processed off the water in a jurisdiction other than the Russian Federation, they are no longer considered to originate in the Russian Federation. An oil industry source added that as the UK is not self-sufficient in diesel, it has to buy from somewhere, and if it doesn't get it from India, it risks paying a higher price elsewhere and passing the cost on to the consumer. Full ban not difficult. But Oleg Ustenko, economic advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, called on Western allies of Ukraine to toughen up the current sanctions to include a full ban on all refined oil products derived from Russian crude. We have to do everything possible to cut off finance to Russia. We have to make sure they do not have enough cash in their hands to continue this bloody war against us, he said. It should be done in these countries who are really our allies, starting the UK, EU, and US. It's not difficult for the UK to introduce that kind of ban. CREA's Mr. Levi agreed that such a move would close the refining loophole. Matt Smith, an analyst at Kepler, which is the source of much of the research, said while it is impossible to separate which refined oil products are produced from Russian material, it is fair to say at least some of the refined products going into Europe are produced from Russian material. The UK was therefore receiving oil products from India that were likely to have been refined from Russian crude, he said. Mr. Smith said while the so-called loophole was undermining sanctions, the situation was complex. It is impossible to extricate Russian crude or products created from Russian material from the global market, he said. Russia is also such a key player that the powers that be don't want to completely eradicate Russia's supply from the global market because it will cause prices to spike. Last year, some US lawmakers also pushed for a ban on fuel imports from refineries that use Russian crude oil, but with US Representative Lloyd Doggett said Joe Wilson introducing a bill to close the refining loophole. All three Indian oil refineries did not respond to the BBC's request for comment. Well, this is definitely a much more complicated situation than it is presented here. While it is true that when it comes to India importing oil from Russia, this is something that definitely does happen. The reality is that the proportion that is presented is much smaller than it is shown to be. And truth be told, the US but the UK in particular were of great help when it came to this. If Russia wants to send oil to India, Russia doesn't have a direct pipeline to India, so there will be no so there isn't exactly a direct way to supply those refineries. Russia would have to send its crude oil to India, just like other countries from the Middle East send their oil to refineries all across the world. They use it via ships. One of the very first sanctions that were imposed on Russian ships no longer being able to be insured by companies, and a lot of shipping insurance companies originate from the UK. The rest of the quite a few are from the US. And several months ago, when because this is not a new discussion, the UK government even they say to some extent that they know about this. The proportion is still much smaller uh, than in reality, specifically because well, to insure an oil tanker, oil tankers are pretty humongous ships. The they sometimes exceed uh, 80 to 100,000 tons in mass, and that's not and that is including the oil. And if you look at the map of the world, how exactly is Russia meant to send their oil tankers all the way to India? Well, when it comes to China, it's easy. They already got a pipeline, and whatever they cannot send on the pipeline, which the pipeline is much smaller than the pipelines that used to be operated used by Russia in order to send oil and natural gas towards Europe. Whatever they can't send for the pipeline, they send through the Pacific ports to feed the Chinese Pacific ports. But that's a really safe measure to send oil that way, because you pretty much have to hug the Russian coast all the way until you reach the Chinese coast. You're not going as a Russian oil tanker to face things like the U.S. The U.S. Coast Guard or the U.S. Navy or in the case of transiting if the Russians will be so dumb to do so to send oil tankers through the Atlantic, which is constantly monitored by the US, UK, and Norway. But getting back to the point that I was trying to make about insurance, it is very risky to send an oil tanker, no matter what country you are, without an insurance. And since oil tankers tend to be the largest ships that exist on the seas and oceans of this world, insurance prices for considering also the cargo that they're carrying is also proportionally larger. And I don't exactly know what sort of schemes and maneuvers the Russians are using in order to ensure the very few ships that they have in order to send the oil to India. But I can guarantee you that. that if you have to add up all the costs, the Russians still make a loss. Not to mention that India in itself is a developing country, and guaranteed they need that energy mostly for themselves. But at the same time, they also need to make some money on the side, refining products and then sending them to whoever wants to buy them. In the current discussion, the diesel and jet fuel to the UK. And but yeah, the UK is right to buy diesel and jet fuel from China, from India, I wanted to say, because it definitely is much cheaper. And sadly, the UK had issues accessing the Commonwealth at an economical and at a trade level because of the EU. But this is no longer the case right now. Hopefully, things will look much better in the future. But this is a situation as it is right now. It's still well, whatever the Indians are refining from Russian oil is already a very small part. It's a drop in the ocean compared to their own demands. And yeah, the estimates are simply wrong. Uh, Volodya make some money from the scheme, but he isn't making nowhere near as much uh, as he should be. Not to mention that India was the country that pulled the stunt months ago to pay for Russian oil in Indian rupees, and the Russians accepted the payment in rupees. Well, so to speak, they didn't exactly accept it, but they did ship the oil. The Indians still want to give them the rupees, but the Russians accepted this form of payment. They just haven't taken it because nobody actually wants on the global currency market to trade Indian rupees. So yeah, pretty much what the Indians did with this scheme is to essentially scam the Russians out of a lot of oil. But at the same time, even though the Russians got scammed in the most grandiose way possible, uh, they they still had to deliver it because if they didn't deliver it, the Indians have also other options to buy oil from. They got quite good relationships with countries from the Middle East. What do the countries in the Middle East have, especially the countries in the GCC? A lot of oil. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates in particular, they wouldn't have any issue going there, and they will definitely get a better deal. The only reason why the Indians are buying specifically Ural crude is because Ural crude is pretty good when distilling to make the heavier fractions that the UK is currently buying, which are jet fuel and diesel. And since logistics and the transportation industry has been experiencing constant growth in India, what does an industry like that require? Well, it requires cheap hydrocarbons, particularly diesel and jet fuel for the airline industry. So to get the idea of this article pretty much does evidence a problem, yes, but there is a lot of what I consider mm, not exactly the coincidental, but a lot of naive misinformation when it comes to the situation this article tries to present at hand. But speaking of disinformation and general bullshitting, BBC under fives betrayed as health declines. Experts. Oh boy. Worsening health among the under fives in the UK needs to be urgently addressed, experts say. The Academy of Medical Sciences highlights what it says are major health issues like infant deaths, obesity, and tooth decay. It says society is betraying children and the problems are limiting their future and damaging economic prosperity. The government says children's health is a priority. A spokeswoman said, "We've taken significant action to improve children's health now and in the long term. This includes measures to reduce sugar in children's food and investing in mental health services and dentistry," she added. But the Academy, which represents medical scientists and health researchers in the UK, pointed out that progress on child health has stalled in recent years. It says the pandemic has increased the cost of living, and increased cost of living was to blame, and had proved particularly damaging to those living in more deprived areas. Its report says the UK is 30th out of 49 rich countries for infant mortality. 1 in 5 children falls short of the expected level of development age 2. 1 in 5 is overweight or obese by 5. Vaccination targets are being missed for diseases such as measles. 1 in 4 is affected by tooth decay by 5. 1 in 5 women struggle with their mental health during or just after pregnancy. Air pollution is linked with worsening asthma. Rising demand for child mental health services. The report calls for a cross-government vision to be developed to tackle the problems and investment in the child health workforce, including health visitors. Well, this is going to be a lengthy article to discuss. So yeah, you probably got the idea of this. When experts talk, they're essentially begging. They're begging for more money. They're begging for more labor, more manpower, in particular. Not exactly more work, because we all know we're talking here exclusively about boiled state workers. Because I wouldn't call them civil servants. Civil servants is a term which is better suited to government workers in other countries where to be considered a servant is actually an insult, while the Anglo countries in particular consider being a civil servant actually something honorable. To go down the list of the issues that this expert report says, starting with the first one, the UK is 30th out of 49 countries for infant mortality. Well, while this is true, the one of the biggest drivers when it comes to this is not only the incompetence of the NHS and the actual lack of support that they offer, but it also has to do with certain coexisting nations, so to speak, in order to not get shit canned or my door destroyed by the authorities, who pretty much do not want to participate in the institutions that the rest of us, for a more pressing reason or another, do. While I can't exactly blame them, they don't want to go to the NHS because examples of incompetence within the NHS are prevalent no matter where you look. You even had several years ago a case of a woman that murdered children in the ward because she was completely deranged out of her mind, and so said kids as some sort of insult towards her existence because she wouldn't have any children. What she did, and what she considered to do good was to kill the others, was to kill the other kids of others that had them. But it speaks larger about the lack of integration of people from other nations that the UK doesn't practice. Well, the UK as itself, yes, it is a brand. We also have to look at the writing on the wall that there are some nations and cultures that are not compatible with with the nation, the culture, and the society of the UK. And that's where one of the big drivers the, towards infant mortality is. When you have people like a certain Muslim country which happens to neighbor India, but no, that's not exclusive to them. Uh, when they've been practicing co-sanguineous marriages for generations and generations, they don't exactly see anything wrong with the fact that their infants are dying when they married their sisters or their cousins. And in the very unfortunate circumstance where when they don't die because that's still something unnatural, and that's why there are a lot of issues. Um, if they are to live past the age of 5, the they live for a lot of reasons disabled for the rest of their lives. You have developmental issues, the degenerative issues. They suffer from weird diseases that nobody in the civilized world heard about. One great example is thalassemia, and and worse so, if these children end up surviving, what do the said parents do? Well, they pretty much expect the financial and logistical assistance of the state in order to keep them to live in that miserable existence of theirs, and that's very unfortunate for such children. Moving on to the next one. 1 in 5 children falls short of the expected level of development age 2. Well, I wonder why that may be the case. Age 2 right now means that they were born, in, depending on when this report was done and when this measurement was taken, they were either born in between 2021 or 2022. And what exactly happened back then? Oh yeah, the entire world went mad, and they started imposing the not just unconstitutional, but also really oppressive measures on its populace, uh, with social distancing, masking up, no long discouraging socialization between people of all ages, nationalities. Where exactly is the surprise here? What I am personally surprised is that the statistic isn't actually higher. 1 in 5 still means 20%. That still means that thankfully the rest of the 80% did something to at least maintain their level of development, which is something good. I'm glad for them. But but the real disappointment is are the said 20% of kids who are undeveloped. I wouldn't be surprised if they are undeveloped because their parents are at fault for this. Parents who may have been unironically wearing masks inside the house, or if they weren't the ones wearing masks, they voluntarily isolated their children from others because they didn't want uh, they didn't want their child to get infected, even though even though statistic itself said that children are not at risk at all from the cough. Worse so, worse so other measures. If they were as dumb to isolate themselves, well, the how much do you want to bet that that when said parents isolated themselves, they've also experienced their own set of mental issues by themselves, and when they had said mental issues, one of the very few things that would have bothered them would have been the upbringing of their child. it is not exactly surprising that when the pandemic hit, quite a shocking amount of parents found out they actually have children, and you don't and you don't exactly get rid of the children when you send them to daycare or kindergarten or to school. That was one of the shocking realities, which I personally wasn't surprised because I worked in education and I saw I saw the societal norm of parents, not just in the UK, not just in the Anglosphere, but also in other countries in the West, and the shocking lack of involvement of the parents in the upbringing of their children. And I wouldn't be surprised that when said parents, leaving aside the point I made earlier about their own mental issues related to pandemic measures, also didn't know how to handle their kid for one reason or another. Moving to the next one. 1 in 5 is overweight or obese by 5. While this is not exactly a surprise anywhere else in the Western world, this is definitely not something unique to the UK. The situation is as it is. While motivations may differ, for example, the UK hasn't gone through situations like Ceausescu's scientific diet imposed on Romanians in the 1980s. Uh, but the British overall are also at fault for falling to the same conveniences as the rest of the world have fallen to. If you really want to know the easy solution to not having overweight kids, for example, if you want to take your kids to a fast food place, well, sure, you can take them once a week or once every 2 weeks, and that's about it. However, what is especially clear in the case of the UK is that they're close, but they're not exactly at the level of the US when it comes to when it comes to going to fast food places. And it's not just fast food places, but also the general unhealthy diet. And here I'm going back to the issue with their parents. This is something completely in the control of the parents. Well, say if they were to eat if they were to eat homemade food, suddenly I can guarantee you that in 5 years, if at least 70% of the parents of these children under 5 did this, then the statistic would have looked it wouldn't have looked into like this to be for the under 5 population to be 20% obese. You would have probably been at most maybe 7%, and that's making a really pessimistic estimation. Vaccination targets are being missed for diseases such as measles. Well, measles isn't exactly something that has to be mandatory to get vaccinated against. Uh, I personally went for measles uh, in between the ages 3 or 4, although I'm not exactly sure I'm what I think was the age of 4. And the reason why I didn't get vaccinated, even though it was on the recommended scheme, is that back then I had much larger health issues related to this, and and simply getting a measles vaccine as the situation was back then, it would have been much more dangerous than actually having the disease itself. And look at me, you I survived, and and a great majority of children that go through measles survive. Even though the MMR vaccine in itself, yes, it is definitely useful if, um, but it will be useful and it is recommended to to a certain group of children if you are in a situation where other health afflictions that you may be suffering from uh, would actually pose a bigger danger to you in the instance when you would actually get measles. It, it is what it is, and again the vaccination target being missed. See what I mentioned in the first point about infant mortality. This is also because certain incompatible cultures in this country simply don't even know about these things. 1 in 4 is affected by tooth decay by 5. Same point I made about the obesity argument. Well, the situation with tooth decay the, would have been much smaller if the children's diet would have looked different. There is exactly much to say about that, and with tooth decay in itself, but I don't exactly see uh, why is it made so important when already children in between ages 9 to 12 or probably 13 at most will already get a, a new set of teeth once the so-called child teeth will fall out at some point. So this isn't exactly in itself a bigger issue on the longer term. 1 in 5 women struggle with mental health during or just after pregnancy. Yeah, this is pretty clear. It's called postpartum depression. It's something that has existed since humanity has existed. It's not something new. It's not something unique. It just happens. Mm. Postpartum depression just happens. That's also the reason when the criminal code of a lot of countries uh, when it comes to, say, for example, in the case of the US, if a mother kills her child and the child is, I think, below the age of 2 or 3, it's considered infanticide. If a man does it, it's considered first-degree murder. For the simple reason that at least that in the criminal code of the US, they recognize this possibility that due to postpartum depression, the woman's mental status is is already in quite a precarious condition because there is a lot of change when it comes to certain mother's chemistry in the brain and in the body. And there are sadly the instances when this chemical change does lead to things like that. What is the issue again? And we're getting back here to the incompetence of the NHS. Is that if you as a government said that so that you want to support your people with a national healthcare system, then why aren't you offering it? Well, you don't exactly offer it because not a lot of people want to work for you, and and the very few people that want to work for you absolutely hate you, and then you have a lot of other perverse incentives being part of anything that is a public system. Healthcare is just one example in a sea of other examples. Uh, when you're not faced with circumstances such as having a certain performance criteria or have at least some sort of key performance indicators, uh, why would you, as a psychologist in the NHS, the few that are out there, well, you're already definitely overcrowded because your list would look as this, and then it will sudden, and then you'll have to walk to the next room in order to find the end of it because of the said government healthcare guarantee. Uh, in itself, what a lot of people don't know, and definitely what the bored state workers that manage public healthcare don't know is that if you assuming you are a decent psychologist, if you want to if you want to effectively help a person, that takes a toll on you. Uh, Speak with any psychologist that you may know in private practice that you know he's competent, and ask him how many times does he take periods of time off, and you will see that he takes them quite often, and they also take them quite randomly depending on their need, because if you want to be an efficient psychologist and to genuinely help the person, you have to get involved emotionally and on all other levels, and that takes a toll on you because of psychology doesn't see just one single person. Psychology sees a multitude of other people, and depending on the mental resilience of each psychologist, some can tolerate it more or less. And they can also dictate how much time do they need off, and how often do they need time off. But one thing is sure, you you can't exactly you can't exactly force a person to overload, because if said psychologist ends up getting overloaded and burnt out, then then the person who you've proposed as being at least part of the solution suddenly switches to become part of a problem. And to get back to the point, yes, some women struggle with postpartum depression. Also, the support isn't there, and that's exactly the failure of the government. As they took the responsibility, you're being the ones offering the support, and the support isn't there. And if support isn't there when you need it, the support is there at some point in time when you'll probably no longer matter for one reason or another. Air pollution is linked to worsening asthma. Yeah, well, I'm not exactly buying this one. Well, air pollution in general has well, it is true that it does worsen things like asthma. There's nothing that you can do about it. Already in the past decade or so, general pollutants that you find in the air in the UK have seen a constant decrease. Uh, but here it's important to discuss in what region, in what place they're exactly talking about. You can't exactly do a blanket judgment of how air pollution is in a place like London, which is a ginormous metropolis, or how air pollution is in a place like some village in rural England, where you have nothing but grassland and forests and farmland all around you, and then nothing industrial. Uh, this is also a blanket statement which is just added there in the list in order to make the situation look worse than it actually is. Because in order to get rid of air pollution, that's impossible. I suppose some sort of air pollution will always be there. Um, it, it is what it is in the end. And truth be told, steps have been taken uh, towards this with the with the use of with the addition of biofuels in the fuels, with things like low emission zones, uh, with a constant and growing scrutiny over pollution caused by the industry to the level that can even be perceived as outright oppressive. But the truth of the matter is, steps have been taken. You're not going to have a perfect world. You're not going to have zero air pollution because zero air pollution never existed. Even the cavemen, when they made a fire, they experienced air pollution themselves because when wood burns, it releases it releases solid pollutants in the surrounding atmosphere. It just is what it is. Rising demand for child mental health services. Well, this I will connect it to the point I made when I spoke about the level of development for children age 2. Oh, gee, why probably that is necessary now? There is also it's also worse that the child mental health services have sadly become more and more important for the children of this country, but also for children in a lot of other countries. Um, sadly, the measures of the pandemic have played quite a large role into this, even though the situation was definitely much better before the pandemic than it used to be. But overall, there are a lot of other things that are feeding into the constantly degrading mental health of children. One is truly uh, the lack of access when it is necessary because of the overcrowding of public health care. The second, the second is the parents. The third also tied to the parents is also the increasing use of smartphones in order to keep in order to keep the child occupied. Fourth is about the pandemic measures and all the developmental issues that appeared in children because of that. Who would have thought that if you were to mask the population of a country and you took your child out, assuming that you took your child out because there are quite a few that haven't, um, the children up until the age of 3 do not know how to talk, or if they learn how to talk, they learn much later, and that's not because of things like autism, because that's a completely different topic. That's what the reason is that then this has been seen by by doctors studying child development for at least a century. Uh, the children learn how to talk, looking at the lip movement of the said people that are talking to them. If you put a mask over their faces, they no longer see those lips, and they won't learn how to talk. It's that simple. I think that's as much as I can say about this thing. This entire article published by the BBC, but presented by the experts, uh, it's just another cry. It's just another cry out to the government to do something, to do something because how dare you consider personal responsibility and also if you're a parent, responsibility towards your offspring to be something that's important. Sky News. Royal Navy plastic ships to take part in biggest NATO exercise since Cold War, after UK flagship pulls out with last-minute issue. The four P-2000 plastic patrol craft, HMS Biter, Blazer, Exploit and Trumpeter, will be taking part in exercise Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. HMS Prince of Wales will stand in for HMS Queen Elizabeth, which has been forced to pull out of the mission. Four of the Royal Navy's smallest ships are preparing to head to Norway's Arctic coast and take part in a NATO exercise after a problem was found on the fleet's largest ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth. They will be taking part in exercise Steadfast Defender, the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War in March. HMS Prince of Wales is set to stand in for HMS Queen Elizabeth, which has been forced to pull out because of the mission because of a propeller issue, the Ministry of Defense said. The departure of the fleet flagship from Portsmouth Naval Base at the weekend was cancelled at the last minute after final inspections spotted a problem with the starboard propeller coupling on the £3.5 billion warship. The four P2000 plastic patrol craft set sail from Portsmouth on Monday as they make final preparations before heading to Norway. The four vessels, which normally patrol coastlines and have a crew of only 5 each, are tiny, just over 20 meters long and displacing 54 tons, compared to the aircraft carriers, which are 283 meters long and displace 65,000 tons. During the deployment of the Archer class craft, will have to cope with temperatures averaging at -6 degrees, dropping around -30 degrees in the high north when they sail above the 70th parallel. The four patrol craft will leave Portsmouth later this month for the 4-month deployment, traveling via the Netherlands, Germany, and Denmark before reaching their destination. It comes at a time when UK forces are being called on to operate in multiple regions. Well, yeah, well, this situation with the construction of HMS Queen Elizabeth and the Prince of Wales is a shit show in itself, which will definitely not be part of a video that I will make because I don't know much about this. There are probably better YouTubers with better documentation than what I did. Overall, what will happen is yes, the issue was spotted on the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier, but what are they doing right now is in order to fix that issue and to replace the HMS Prince of Wales, which was intended to go to the Red Sea in order to secure the shipping lanes there, to replace the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, because Dwight D. Eisenhower has been staying in that area for quite a few weeks, and the supplies on the ship aren't infinite. And they don't exactly have quite a lot of places where they can drop anchor and resupply. So as a result, yeah, it's a simple error. It will be resolved. They already found a solution. But but overall, in Steadfast Defender, the main focus is on the territorial deployment, on the ground deployment. The if it ever comes to the circumstance of a war between NATO and Russia, the ground deployment is what's the most important thing, because there are thousands of kilometers of potential front line if it ever comes to that, and there are tens of countries which will be involved into this. So for a steadfast defender, surely it's also the North Atlantic and the threats that that the ships in that area may be facing. It's also worth mentioning that that's not exactly quite as important as the territorial deployment of troops in Eastern Europe. And the UK, truth be told, have pledged 16,000 troops to be part of the Steadfast Defender within continental Europe. In the circumstance, if a war were ever to happen, and the North Atlantic will become definitely an important part of this, because the North Atlantic is also the gateway through which all sorts of Russian ships and submarines which would have to go through in order to either threaten merchant shipping in order to supply continental Europe, but also threaten other naval operations of NATO. Well, we're sorry to say for the Russians, but the NATO countries have already prepared the North Atlantic in the circumstance if the Cold War ever went hot. to not only lock down but also dominate that area in order to cut off dangerous elements of the Russian Navy, like for example submarines, and by that I mean submarines in particular, simply because uh, submarines by the fundamental manufacturing can hide much easier than a surface ship will ever do. And for a few decades, this may not be a thing that a lot of people may know, but in the North Atlantic there are exactly uh, uh, three gigantic sonar buoy arrays which have been installed during the Cold War, and they have been constantly maintained since then, even if the USSR collapsed. Um, here I'm talking first the one that starts from Scotland and goes to the Faroe Islands, then to Iceland, and from Iceland you also have the tiny corridor between northern Iceland and Greenland covered by that sonar buoy array. Then there is also another sonar buoy array uh, that starts uh, that starts from northern Norway to the Svalbard archipelago. The sonar buoy is specifically designed to sniff out any Russian submarines that may be coming in the area, uh, and to prevent their departure uh, further southwest from the Arctic or the North Atlantic. Well, this is as much as it can be said on this topic. Yeah, the UK sent four plastic ships and an aircraft carrier. Well, that's not exactly bad. It's as best as it can be done. I've discussed in the previous episode what the entire situation with defense spending is in the UK. This is as much as it can be done. Thankfully, across the Atlantic, there is a much more reliable ally for continental Europe, who definitely has much more hardware, much more manpower that we can rely on. South China Morning Post. China could boost demand and ease deflation with cash payments, analysts say. Research institutions and observers have suggested demand stimulus in the form of cash payments could prevent substantial deflationary spiral. Direct cash injection would encourage businesses to expand and boost activity, but policymakers show no signs of interest. I wonder why. A lack of stimulus for demand in China could send prices toppling lower and pile more pressure onto China's already faltering economy, researchers said this week. Without official measures to motivate spending, consumers may cut back on purchases, leading merchants to slash prices and earn too little income to expand their business. That cycle could add deflationary pressure and hit the wider economy. Without powerful policy interventions, the deflation expectation may become entrenched and start to hurt consumption and investment demands, the Institute for International Finance said in a research note on Monday. It warned of a downside risk if the demand-side stimulus is inadequate. Chinese officials are expected to target 5% economic growth this year, but the International Monetary Fund has set its forecast for just 4.6%. The Institute, a US-based industry group, pointed to a possible slow recovery for China's deep housing crisis, which combined with the stock market slump, may hit household wealth and consumption harder than expected. China's years-long housing crisis stems from overdevelopment and government curbs on lending. Policy responses from Beijing would steer this year's domestic economic performance, the research note said. The government has plenty of ways to stimulate demand, namely by giving a cash stimulus to households, said Christopher Bedor, Deputy Director for China Research at Gavical Dragonomics. He added, however, that idea hasn't featured in policymakers' thinking. Demand stimulus normally raises inflation while stimulating the supply side, which China has shown preference for, creates oversupply and leads to weak inflation, Bedor said. Beijing may be holding back on stimulus now to see if that stance lets the property crisis unwind and return to normal on its own, said Dexter Roberts, the director of China Affairs with the US-based University of Montana's Mansfield Center. The government has been criticized for kicking the can down the road and pumping more stimulus into the economy, Roberts said. With so many consumers worrying about their homes losing value, he said, few are spending at the moment. People are seeing their one big asset in the best case stay flat and in the worst case depreciate, so they don't want to open their wallets and start spending, Roberts said. Investors are growing weary, Goldman Sachs has found. The financial institution said on Sunday that investors in China had recently self-reported an average of 1.5 on a 10-point confidence scale, 10 being the highest. Risk of sustained deflation are rising on continued supply-side expansion and no demand-side stimulus. Despite the event needed for stimulus, the bank said, observers were not optimistic that need will be filled. No local investors expected nationwide consumption coupons this year during our conversations, despite the very low consumer confidence and deflationary pressures in recent months. In light of the authorities' continued emphasis on high-quality development, policymakers will only conduct piecemeal easing and will be using targeted measures only. Merchants who have cut prices on deflationary pressure might lay off workers rather than expand, Roberts said. He added they might sell their low-cost goods offshore, even at the risk of anti-dumping action overseas. The biggest deflation factor is a high sense of insecurity among business people, private firms, and officials, said Chen Jiwu, chief professor of finance at the University of Hong Kong. No one feels really secure about tomorrow. Huh, well, no one feels secure about tomorrow because yeah, even if the rest of the world during the pandemic went mad with the measures, from a lot of points of view, China was definitely very far up on that scale, and also the Chinese kept the Chinese, and by that I mean the CCP, kept the measures also for a lot longer than the rest of the world did. And faced with the current situation, when the housing market in itself was very important for the Chinese people, because it was their own way of saving up some money into a sound investment, which actually had some fundamentals. Nobody could take the house from under you. Uh, the bigger issue is that is not that the Chinese wouldn't spend money; it's that they have no money. Uh, you look at every large city that there used to be a booming, prosperous place before the pandemic, and you look, for example, in the case of Shanghai, about two-thirds of the businesses that existed uh, in the central area of Shanghai have shut down during the pandemic, and they never opened after that. That leads to that there is a lack of jobs. When people don't have jobs, who knows how much money they exactly have. So with no visible future opportunity, what they are going to do is that they're going to hold on to the little money they have left and hope for better in the future. But the future also doesn't look as good for when it comes to China in itself. The with the continued divestment of and with the increasing hostility over exports from China in the rest of the world. To put it simply, uh, companies no longer want to work for China. So you have the domestic market, which yeah, it has increased for a while when the said transition to a consumer economy started happening in 2018. Uh, it's it's only finite. It's only finite within China. Plus, it's also not exactly financially lucrative for businesses to invest in order to manufacture, in order to do something for the domestic market. On top of the fact that the Chinese do not have a lot of money left. Uh, we're talking here about individuals. So when the overseas markets don't want you, the domestic market isn't exactly too financially lucrative in order to go through all the headache of founding a business, employing people, who knows what other state workers that you have to kiss in order to get that business up and running. Yeah, the uh, at a very basic level, the steamy checks may help the situation, but the Chinese. But the Chinese people, and especially the majority of the Chinese who actually have money-related issues these days, that they will not be going out and spending, which is the reason why the biggest deflation that has been seen on in statistics has been when it came to food items, which the deflation there is about 5% on average. What the Well, what the great majority of the Chinese people do, if they were to get a if they were to get a stimulus check similar to what Trump did in the U.S. During the pandemic, what they will do is to at least extinguish a part of their liabilities, so a part of their credits or their loans. That's essentially what would happen. And that exactly doesn't help because what the Chinese economy needs now is more consumption, and that consumption sadly isn't there. So now, as we finished with one insane asylum, let's go to the conspiracy theory at the corner of the planet. The Australian National backed rally calls on the party to ditch its net zero target by 2050 commitment. Protesters at the rally against reckless renewables have urged the National Party to abandon its support for net zero by 2050, declaring wars without action are meaningless. The rally took place outside Parliament House and saw hundreds of landowners, conservationists, and activists from around the country converge to protest Labour's 82% renewables target and call on a Senate inquiry into the impact of the projects. While some raised concern with the effect offshore wind farms could have on marine life, others criticized the decision to phase out fossil fuels and questioned the socialist claims around climate change. Oh boy. Despite a dozen national MPs, including leader David Littleproud, speaking at the rally in support of the cause, many speakers criticized the party for going along with the coalition's net zero by 2050 policy. One author and conservative activist, Jeff Grimshaw, urged a crowd of hundreds to write to their local member and tell them you won't support them if they support net zero. Wars without action are meaningless, and claiming you're against renewables and then going back into that building with the party on board with net zero. The Nationals have to pull their heads in and tell the Liberals it's either us or net zero, he said, to cheers from the audience. If it comes to it, get out the coalition, run against them, because we need someone to stand up for us. Mr. Littleproud defended the party's support for net zero and said that if the coalition had not signed up, primary producers would have faced export controls from countries around the world declaring they will not do business with nations lacking strong climate commitments. We have to understand we're an export nation and we don't get to set all the international trading rules, he said. In his speech at the crowd, Mr. Littleproud said the National Party would not be part of any coalition that spends a cent on projects such as the pumped hydro program in Ungela. We can make sure that we invest in the technology that protects the traditional industries of coal and gas with carbon capture storage, but look to the new technology of nuclear, making sure we have net zero emissions. That's the courage the Nationals have brought to this place, he said. Former Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce, who packed a motion at the party's national conference last year to strip net zero from its policy platform, said it was important the focus remained on fighting renewables. There were a lot of people at the rally who wanted to go off in all sorts of directions, and that is not going to help because I know enough about politics to say you give people a clear idea of why you're there and you stick to it, he said. Liberals, including Tony Passon, also spoke in support of the rally against renewables, as well as members of the United Australia Party and One Nation. Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong told protesters who came into the Senate gallery during question time that the Nationals have backed many renewables projects in the past and to remember that when they come to your rallies and tell you how much of a friend they are. Well, overall, see, even though we're talking here about the penal colony, the said action, the way it was taken, uh, is what everyone else should do when it comes to pressing issues like these. If you have the opportunity to talk with your local representative, you do it. You write to them. You, if you live in a local area where you may have there's such a CCP-backed grift, which are pretty much renewables, particularly solar panels. Uh, uh, you either meet him on the street or you request an audience, and then you go and talk to him. And then you go and talk to him, and you tell him why this is a bad idea, why this is going to cost everybody the much more in the longer term, and then also other issues that you may be finding along the way to support your case, simply put. And but at the level of the government, the with the pledging to be net zero by 2050, here we can see the the deficits of the UNGRO framework of doing things. Well, sure, you pledge that you will be net zero by 2050, but if you jump into investing a lot of money in renewables, whether they are wind farms or solar, because let's be honest, those are the most accessible ones and those are the most lucrative ones for politicians because they don't take a lot of time to build up, and they're also very visible, even though they're not exactly as efficient as they're marketed to be. Nowhere near others compared to nuclear power plants, which which depending on the size can take even 1.5 or 2 electoral cycles just to build. And when you will build it, not a lot of people will be remembering you and say, well, for this power plant, I remember that I don't know that Michael from the National Party said that he'll build it and see that they built it, so that I will be supporting his as well as I'll be supporting his party because he built that nuclear power plant. Well, it's not going to be the case, and decisions like these are also taken by politicians in order to at least support their own support their own campaigns, whether they are the ones happening right now, or whether if it is to increase the legitimacy of the party, and in order to gain more voters, depending on the issues. No, and not to mention, and Australians in particular know very well about this because they're about the closest at an economical level to China. They are aware that solar panels in particular are purely a Chinese grift. The vast majority of the solar panels, which are part of all sorts of programs all over the world, where you get money from the government to put them to put them on your house. The vast majority are built in China, and and since they're built in China, they're built cheap. Then they're not exactly as efficient, they're not exactly as resilient, but you as a politician, you don't care. What people will see is that there will be rural houses with solar panels on the rooftops, or there will be a certain plot of land with a lot of solar panels on it. That's what they care about. To have quick and visible results for their own gain, and make sure that by themselves, that with schemes like the construction of solar panels, they're also trying to feed their own political clientele, whether it's already existing ones, say for example companies who have already been funding their campaigns or their party, who also want to expand into something else in order to make more money. This is what everybody's doing. You can deem it you can deem it so corruption, and to some extent nepotism, but without the family aspect of nepotism. But that's just the way everybody works. The campaigns run on money, and even though there are private individuals that either donate their money or their time for your campaign, at the current level in the world, that's not sufficient. And truth be told, it never was enough. Everybody represented from one point or another, some company interest at some point in time. It just is what it is. But uh, but getting back to the net zero, uh, here we can also see the sheer deficit in interaction between the political class and the people, particularly because even if the Australians may be Anglo in their origins, um, they're much more flexible when it comes to having their direct interactions with them. Say, well, if the government, for example, mentioned that, well, if we are an export economy, we've been threatened by other countries that they will stop buying from us if we didn't have this and this climate commitment. You could have simply said, through institutions or think tanks or NGOs, uh, which I assume were built in order to support your cause. You could have simply sent an unofficial message through them. Yeah, it is a commitment, but still, it's a commitment. It doesn't mean that we're actually going to support it. Plus, especially because 2050 is 25 years from now on. Who knows what's going to happen in 25 years? Um, a lot of countries barely know what's going to happen 3 to 4 years from now on, let alone 25 years. A lot of things can change from that moment on. So yeah, you as a government could have easily said that yeah, we've made this commitment because of these people. But you can also say as they say, but you can do but in the end you can do as you want. Mm, just because you committed to something at the national political level and at the international level, especially if it's something as mundane as the climate, because the climate is something mundane, is being brought into the face of the public, uh, by a lot of interest groups which are financed in order to maintain this grift with climate change stuff, even though fundamentally they are liars, and and the world doesn't exactly contribute as much to the climate as they would like, as they would want us to think. And sadly, they did dupe a lot of people into this. So why do you think people like Greta Thunberg continue to exist, even though she becomes slowly the laughing stock, especially when it comes to the younger generations, the generation from her age group. So simply put, because you can deceive some people all the time. You can deceive all the people sometime, but you cannot deceive all the people all the time. Mm. It just is what it is. Yeah. So you could have you could have signed a commitment, or you would have at least sent through diplomatic channels. Oh yeah, we're definitely going to where we're going to have this governmental order saying that we're going to do something by 2050 related to the climate. But you could have made it intentionally vague. You could have put some really low targets there. Uh, you could have, or else, if you really wanted, if you really want to give your bureaucrats some work to do, what you could have done is simply just to flood them with so much bureaucracy and so much legal jargon, so that nobody would make sense. So what exactly do you want? And in the end, since no one can make sense, plus from the perspective of private sector, they don't exactly have an obligation to respect the net zero, because that's something that the government wants. They could simply just do what they consider best and just keep on doing what they're doing, and be sure that they will adapt. They will adapt according to the needs and the economic context of their time that they will be facing. Going south to the insane asylum neighbor, stuff.nz. Climate activist wins chance to sue Fonterra and Z Energy. Fonterra, Z Energy, and Genesis will have their planet heating ways cross-examined in court after the Supreme Court unanimously sided with activist Mike Smith. Smith is suing 7 of the country's highest polluting companies. The defendants failed to have the case struck out before it proceeded to a full hearing. A 5-year battle for Smith's case to be heard concluded in the Supreme Court judgment overruling the lower court's issue this morning. The Maori and climate rights campaigner is arguing that by contributing to climate change, 7 companies with some of the country's largest carbon footprints are in breach of well-established common law principles. Smith's ultimate goal is to get the court to order the companies to reduce their polluting activities. To have the case dismissed at this early stage, the companies need to prove it was bound to fail. The Supreme Court dismissed these arguments. The defendants, coal miner BT Mining, oil importer Channel Infrastructure, farming company Dairy Holdings, dairy giant Fonterra, which burns coal to dry milk, energy company Genesis, which burns coal and gas to create electricity, NZ Steel, which also burns coal and petrol and diesel retailer Z Energy, said they had no relationship with Smith and therefore no legal duties to him. In the decision disagreeing with the Courts of Appeal, the Supreme Court justices concluded the business must take responsibility for its contribution to a widespread problem impacting the public. The ruling said real caution is necessary before preemptively disposing of a claim where seriously arguable, non-trivial harm is an issue. Presenting the ruling, Justice Stephen Koss said it is not an assessment about the claim is bound to succeed at trial. Smith argued his community and property were already being harmed by the actions of large emitters, a breach of the common law protections against public nuisance and negligence. During a pre-trial session in August last year, Smith's legal team argued the companies also had a novel duty of care which could be examined during a full hearing. The hearing should also explore what tikanga, Maori customary practices or behaviors, has to say on the matters, the team told the 5 Supreme Court justices. The legal team representing the company said the common law claims require a relationship between the claimant and all defendants. There is no relationship between Smith and the companies, the defendants told the court, therefore no legal obligations. The companies also argued that Smith has suffered no more harm from climate change than anyone else, whereas a legal claim requires a person to show they have suffered special damage. As an owner of coastal land, which will be flooded and eroded by sea level rise, Smith has tenable claim, Justice Coss said. But in a precedent-setting finding, the Supreme Court fought the rule requiring a claimant to provide special damage to prove special damage requires reconsideration, especially as the world better understands the harms of pollution, including greenhouse gases. The Supreme Court agreed that climate change throws up difficult questions, but a full hearing was needed to offer answers, it concluded. The country's highest court also overruled the Court of Appeal's finding that the common law was not the place to address climate change. The common law had dealt with lesser-scale existential crises of pollution from the Industrial Revolution, I assume the reporter wanted to say, today's ruling noted. For a public nuisance claim to be successful, the court said the defendant's actions or omissions would need to cross a threshold and be classed as substantial and unreasonable, and only some emitters will cross that bar, the court said. The Supreme Court warned that Smith's desired outcome, a court order to stop polluting, was a challenge, but an equitable remedy involving a substantial measure of discretion was possible. With the public nuisance claim given a green light, the other two claims, including the novel duty, also got the go-ahead, since exploring these is unlikely to take much extra time in court. The justices said Smith's claimed loss is part of Tikanga-based, so the trial court will be required to engage with Tikanga, including conceptions of loss that are neither physical nor economic. The 7 companies named in the lawsuit represent about a third of New Zealand's annual emission, according to Smith's lawyers. Overall, the Supreme Court judges thought the Court of Appeal had asked the right questions, but said, "We are not satisfied that the court reached the right conclusion on each of them." Smith now gets his day in court, the justices said. They foreshadowed a long legal battle, noting the case may yet return to us. Yeah, so on this topic, I may eat my words in the future, but I think that this case will be thrown out of court. And if it won't be, what will most likely happen is that in civil court, said companies might probably provide some sort of program or a stipend to him and the community, but then realistically, no, nothing else will happen because the sheer assumptions which rest in this case are absolutely ludicrous. For example, it says here that said individual, so this one, Mr. Smith, said owns coastal land, but it will be, but the owner of coastal land, which will be flooded and eroded by sea level rise. Well, excuse me, but how exactly are you going to put the blame on companies from your own country for the fact that the sea levels rise? I could also argue right here that sea levels can suddenly rise if there would be an earthquake and suddenly a tsunami would come over over your house and take you all along with it. How, but say in the instance that you survive, what were you going to do in that moment? Were you going to sue God? Were you going to sue the tectonic plates? Were you going to sue the ocean in order to seek the justice? No, you won't, because it's absurd. It's ludicrous, and not exactly sure why this is exactly a news article in New Zealand. Probably because it involves it involves the Maoris and their practices in this, but also most likely because because the entire idea in itself that you as an individual, even though you are a Maori, to go and take to court the largest companies in your country because they are apparently messing around with your feng shui. Because this is pretty much what it is. Uh, Reading this article and the sheer assumptions that this guy got to. Overall, it's really disappointing that the Supreme Court did not exactly shut this case down. But that may be actually a good thing. This case has definitely gathered quite a lot of media traction, and all the companies, even if one of them that Mr. Smith is suing would actually to take it with a little bit more seriousness, they can definitely find, if not within New Zealand, absolutely anywhere else in the world, somebody who can present enough cases on behalf of the company saying that they're not responsible of such absurdities like Mr. Smith claims. This is Overall, this is what this entire article boils down. You have a Maori minority national who is upset that his feng shui is messed up uh, by the biggest companies in New Zealand. I'm pretty sure that on that coastal area that he lives on, he lives there most likely with all the comforts of modern life. A lot of those comforts being provided by a few of these said companies that he's suing. The the petrol that he puts in his car comes from the company that imports uh, the said oil and probably and refines it in New Zealand. If he has kids and has to give the formula, that's most likely made by Fonterra. Uh, if he heats or powers all the things in his home, then it's a high possibility that all that electricity he's consuming may be coming from the company Genesis. Uh, everything else that may be in his house. Say, for example, all the rebar used in the house or on his foundation. It's a possibility that it was made by New Zealand Steel. Well, what can I say? Uh, you're kind of hypocritical here, and if this case wouldn't be thrown out, I really will want to see how this case play out and how will the companies give you a run for their money with all your delusions. Right, so this was about everything. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And see you at a later date. Cheers.